South and southwest. Those continue during Friday. Further bouts of rain or showers moving through parts of England and Wales. Some brighter interludes at times, but a gusty wind. Meanwhile, the rain, sleet and hail snow pushes north, increasingly affecting eastern Scotland, where significant snow will build up during the second half of Friday and into the start of the weekend. 20 centimetres over the Grampians, for example, but rain generally at lower levels as we begin the weekend for the north and east of Scotland. Elsewhere, brighter spells for many on Saturday morning. Certainly some sunshine for the north, central and eastern part of England, but further showers come through from the west later on. And it's going to be much milder across most of the UK through the weekend, except for the far north of Scotland.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight,
we've also got people, I think, who thought we've also. Oh, right.
Will Starmer sack Ed Miliband? Nigel Farage is here with the Rwanda Files Part 2.
This is an important story. This trickle of young males crossing the channel will, unless we're careful, turn into a flood tide.
I'll also ask, are immigrants taking your dentist appointment? Plus, could there be 10,000 arrests this Saturday due to a face-covering ban? It's unlikely. We haven't even found this born-again Christian yet.
You know, I am appealing to Abdul that he needs to come forward to get that medical attention and to hand himself in.
We have the latest on the chemical attack manhunt, and what do you see here? Racism. That's what that is. Find out why the countryside is racist. On my panel tonight is his star Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, Tory peer Lord Bailey and ex-Labour advisor Matthew Larser. And what on earth is going on here? Well, get ready, Britain. Here we go. Sir Keir Starmer is useless and Ed Miliband has to go. Next.
The top story from the GB newsroom tonight. US President Joe Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at his home, but he won't face criminal charges. This news just into us in the last half hour. An investigation into sensitive documents kept in his garage in Delaware began more than a year ago after it was revealed the documents were top secret and contained details of US foreign policy on Afghanistan. In his defence, the president's special counsel portrayed him as an elderly man with a poor memory. The White House says President Biden and his team cooperated fully with the investigation and handed the material back immediately. Well, in news here at home, Labour has confirmed it is axing billions of pounds from its commitment to environmental issues. Sir Keir Starmer said today the pledge, one of the party's flagship policies, will be scaled back to almost £24 billion instead of the original £28 billion. He says Labour has had to cut back on their warm homes plan to insulate millions of houses over the next decade. But he went on to blame the Tories for a very broken economy.
The reason for that is because since we announced the 28 billion, the Tories have done terrible damage to our economy, not just the Liz Truss budget, but also now the government briefing that it's going to max out on the government credit card. Reckless, but I have to anticipate the circumstances as they are now, not as I'd wish them to be.
Sir Keir Starmer, well, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trott, says today's announcement confirms Labour doesn't have a plan for Britain.
For months, Labour have been saying that their 2030 energy policies are going to cost £28 billion. And all that's happened today is that they confirmed that they don't have a plan to pay for that. Not having a plan inevitably means imposing higher taxes on working people, and that is why Labour would take Britain back to square one.
Now, in other news today, armed police have searched 2 addresses in Newcastle today in their hunt for chemical attack suspect Abdul Azizi. It's understood the search warrants included his place of work, but no arrests were made. Azizi is believed to be suffering from severe facial injuries, which police say could be life-threatening if left untreated. The last recorded sighting of him was near Vauxhall Bridge in London, just after 11 o'clock last Wednesday evening. Protesters who cover their faces to avoid arrest could face tough penalties under new laws being announced today. Demonstrators would also be blocked from climbing war memorials or letting off flares. Citing the right to protest will no longer be an excuse for causing major disruption, as the Home Office seeks to crack down on what it calls dangerous disorder. Critics say the new powers represent a threat to civil liberties. In Iceland, molten lava is once again bubbling up, with smoke clouds floating up into the sky in the country's 3rd volcanic eruption in recent weeks. Bright orange lava can be seen spilling across roads near the popular Blue Lagoon geothermal spa in the southwest of the country. Residents of the town of nearby Grindavik have already been evacuated from their homes after an eruption in mid-January. Officials have been working to divert lava flows away from homes and key infrastructure. Now, snow is blanketing parts of the country today as a new cold spell settles in. Dozens of schools were closed as forecasters warned that up to 25 centimetres of snow could fall in some areas. Amber warnings for snow are in place in parts of northern England and North Wales, with yellow warnings across the rest of the UK. And the Met Office is saying the worst of the weather is expected later on this evening, with snowy conditions moving further north tomorrow. For the latest news stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Sir Keir Starmer is awful and Ed Miliband has to go. Cast your mind back to when Sir Flip-Flop became Labour leader. Nobody thought he'd make a good Prime Minister. Nobody thought he was inspirational. Nobody really thought he was any good. He hasn't changed. The only thing Sir Keir Starmer has going for him is Rishi Sunak. Ed Miliband will go down as one of the most ineffective and possibly worst politicians of his generation. It is presumably just weeks before he's doing a podcast with Rory Stewart in Gary Lineker's spare room. The £28 billion Green Plan was Labour's flagship policy. Miliband put it forward and Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced it at Labour Party conference in 2021. Miliband actually said this as recently as June last year. Some people don't want Britain to borrow to invest in the green economy. They want us to back down, but Keir, Rachel and I will never let that happen. Britain needs this £28 billion a year plan, and that is what we are committed to. Fast forward to today, and we have yet another screeching U-turn. Let's add that to the list, shall we? Keir Starmer sacks Rayner, promotes Rayner. He biffed her over dodgy local election results, and then after a bit of pressure, decided to give her the ludicrous titles of, and I think I'm right in saying this, Shadow First Secretary of State, Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and Shadow Secretary of State for Future of Work. Nationalisation. When he ran for the Labour leadership, Sir Keir said he'd bring rail, mail, energy and water into common ownership. In 2022, that plan was dropped. Obviously, we've got Brexit.
I'm really pleased that whatever outcome the next Prime Minister puts before us, whether that's a deal of some sort or no deal, we've agreed that it must be subject to another referendum. And in that referendum, Remain must be an option, and Labour will be campaigning for Remain.
Universal credit, he was going to abolish it, now he's going to reform it. Scrap university tuition fees, he said he'd do it when he ran for Labour leader. He did the old reverse ferret on that one too. Childcare as well, universal childcare from the end of paternal leave to the end of primary school. Then less than 6 months later, that was no longer Labour Party policy. Tax the rich in 2020. He said he'd increase income tax for the top 5% of earners. Then he said he wasn't looking to pull the old tax levers anymore. Abolish the House of Lords. Can you guess what happened here, anybody? Yep, that's on the back burner too, isn't it? ULEZ, he backed it when Sadiq Khan wanted to roll it out. Then he rode back when it looked like he'd lose the Uxbridge by-election, which he did. Bankers' bonuses. Slam the government for removing the cap on bankers' bonuses. 3 months later, Labour confirms they would not reverse the policy. If Keir Starmer told you it was raining, you'd have to go outside and check for yourself, wouldn't you? Now, the woman, I should say, well, although to be fair again, that's been very controversial this week, isn't it? The woman he wants to be Home Secretary has posed with a sign saying refugees welcome. The bloke he wants to be Health Secretary wants to essentially privatise the NHS and could lose his seat to an independent pro-Palestine candidate at the next election, after already losing a chunk of his front bench over Gaza. Surely he has to sack Ed Miliband. The £28 billion green stuff was his flagship idea. This guy's a disaster. Everything he touches turns to undiluted sewage. He was the cabinet minister in Gordon Brown's government. He put forward legislation committing Britain to an 80% cut in CO2 emissions. International cost estimates put that in at over £1 trillion. He is quite possibly the most expensive policymaker in British history. He brought Just Stop Oil's Dale Vince into the fold. He wanted nationalised energy companies, pushed for no new oil and gas licences, which has cost Labour the support with the unions. He pushed for Labour to commit to the national grid being carbon-free by 2030, which is mission impossible. He couldn't even bring himself to buy an electric car throughout all of that, by the way. He's not even the most talented Miliband, is he, actually? And that really is saying something, because David's running a charity in America that has been accused of flooding the USA with illegal immigrants, which he will deny. Do you remember the Ed Stone, when he tried and failed to be Prime Minister? Yeah, that ended up as an ornament in a pub restaurant's garden. Ed himself ended up hosting pub quizzes. Question number 1, in what year did I stab my brother in the back? Question number 2, has anyone ever looked worse eating a bacon sandwich? If Miliband doesn't resign, he should be sacked. But knowing Starmer, he'd end up giving him his job back the next day, wouldn't he? Maybe when Wes Streeting gets his hands on the NHS, he can fast-track Starmer up the waiting list, because somebody needs to give him a backbone. But let's get to the thoughts of my panel. We have the wonderful Star Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson. I've got Conservative peer Lord Bailey for you as well, and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larzer. Alison, is Starmer useless and does Miliband have to go?
Well, I think that the getting rid of the 28 billion green prosperity plan was a good idea because he was going to go into the general election with a ball and chain around his leg. The problem is Ed Miliband sat next to Greta Thunberg at an event and he's never quite recovered, Patrick. I mean, he's absolutely believes all this net zero stuff, which is interesting. He is going to penalise ordinary working families. So Labour, which is supposed to represent some of the poorest people in society, is now shackled to a policy which is going to cause all this harm. And it's just not going to be a green prosperity plan. It's going to be a plan for higher energy bills and so on. Ed Miliband, as I agree with you. I mean, you know, truly dreadful. Starmer, but again, as you said in your monologue, looking a lot cleverer next to Rishi, who now is, you know, Starmer would not be popular if it wasn't next to Rishi, who's now ratings down with Prince Andrew, I believe.
Seriously,
yes.
For very different reasons, it must be said.
Minus 47, I think they're on.
Sean, when it comes to this flip-flopping, I mean, by the way, that's not all of it. There's loads more. We just didn't have the time. I mean, it's an absolute disgrace, these flip-flops.
Look, I think it's actually more serious than people think. If you're, imagine for a second you're neutral, you're sat at home and see, which one of these guys am I going to pick? You cannot trust Keir Starmer because he will say anything to get elected. And that's important because I often say this, I was not a Corbyn fan, but you could at least believe he believed what he was saying. And it's important for a leader to believe what he's saying. And it's clear that Keir Starmer absolutely doesn't. But the important thing here, ironically, getting rid of this £28 billion is proper politics because it was going to sink the country. And that is a fact. And what's interesting in Labour's emotional heartland has been poorer people. But these policies are absolutely the metropolitan elite. And people down here in London may be able to afford them. Everywhere else, people are a little bit panicked by them.
Do you think Rishi believes stop the boats, Sean?
I really hope so. I think he does. I think he does. But the problem he's had is that everybody in the political firmament has attacked him. Everything the government's tried to do...
And he hasn't stopped the boats. That's the other problem. He may believe it, he can't do it.
There is that as well. There is that as well. But he's been stopped by other people. Like, I always say about the boats in particular, what would Starmer do?
Smash the gangs.
Well, yeah, but look, well, he'd probably U-turn on that as well, wouldn't he?
Yeah. There will be no U-turn on Smash the Gangs, otherwise...
Well, they're not.
I promise you that. I promise you that. Look, as somebody who was actually at the unveiling of the Ed Stone, although the decision to produce it was above my pay grade, and was brought in to make sure Ed never ate another bacon sandwich near a camera, I have to defend him. Look, I mean, Ed has a really deep commitment to the cause of tackling climate change. I think the party got itself in a mess by getting stuck with this figure of 28 billion, which is figures revealed in 2021 when interest rates for government borrowing were 1%, they're now 4%. So you have to be a lot more careful about what you're borrowing to invest. But the key things that it wants to do, like insulating 1 million British homes a year so that energy bills go down for people, that's going to cost $4 billion a year. It's going to be paid for by the levy on the oil and gas industry, on the profits of the oil and gas industry.
Right, OK, all right, fine. So that's going to be paid for by increasing the tax on oil and gas, yeah?
Not on the oil and gas excess profits of the oil and gas industry, not on people's energy bills.
They're still saying they're going to decarbonise electricity by 2030. That is a physical impossibility, and the price tag for some of these things has been put at between 3 and 4 trillion.
Yeah, I think so. Listen, I agree with you that look, the problem with this policy was, because I've heard the internal debates going on, I've been there where people have been shouting in their phones and having a quivering about it. The problem with it was you can't sell it on the doorstep. You can't sell 28 billion on the doorstep. You can sell making 1 million homes warmer.
The problem with the policy is they'll say anything to get elected. Look, if you're committed...
It's a mess you all have left the country in, Sean.
Again, that is also nonsense as well, because all of these plans were made under the spending that the Labour Party knew the Conservatives, everybody in the country was going to have to deal with.
Which was before the crazy budget.
This idea that, Liz's budget somehow changed the world's nonsense, and that they can continue to blame it on the Tories, which you will get away with for some time, but you're already using that credit. At some point, someone can say no to that.
If Labour were in power... OK, right now, Starmer would have lost half of his front bench over Gaza, and he would have had to have got rid of Ed Miliband over what's just happened right now. He would have had to. Well, you cannot govern.
Well, I think Ed is in support of what the announcement that's been made today. He hasn't contradicted him.
It's his policy. Yeah. It's his flagship policy. Ed Miliband curated this. He put it to Rachel Reid and announced it.
And the key components of it, which are, principally making Britain's homes warmer and reducing families' electricity bills, is still there. Sadly, it's had to be scaled down and put over a longer period of time because of the cost of borrowing and the mess the Tories have got the country in.
Nationalised energy companies. He pushed for no new...
It's still there. The nationalised energy company is still there.
Licenses, which has led to Massive issues with the unions. He pushed for Labour to commit to the national grid being carbon-free by 2030, which is just bonkers and impossible, essentially, as well.
But again, he did all that to woo young people. He did all that. She had all these climate alarmists who terrified everyone, and they thought, we'll sweep in and promise them to change. It was never going to happen. And let's deal with the cost of this. The cost of this was always unaffordable, but it was.
We still have to do it. We have to do it, even if the timetable was overambitious.
Not with his timetable, but the great hypocrisy of Starmer is he says, look, the Tories have mucked everything up. The reason we spent £400 billion was on lockdown and furlough, and Keir Starmer was the biggest fan of lockdown and wanted it to go further, and he wanted more restrictions, so he would have owed even more money if Rishi hadn't said, eat out to help out.
Well, look, if you are feeling skint after that, there's plenty of time for you to grab the chance to win £18,000 in cash with our great British giveaway, and here is all the details that you need to enter.
This is your chance to win £18,000 cash in our very latest Great British Giveaway. Cash to spend on anything you like. That's like having an extra £1,500 in your bank account each month for a whole year. What would you use that for?
Well, congratulations, you've won £10,000.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable. That's brilliant news.
For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 23rd of February. Good luck.
Still to come, Britain, I think, is now a global laughingstock for allegedly being conned by an Afghan man with a fake asylum claim. I'm laughing because of how ridiculous it is, right? So he was allegedly a Russian spy who went on to work for the Foreign Office, MI5 and GCHQ. Who better than Nigel Farage to get stuck into this and the bombshell Rwanda files very, very shortly. Big Nige up next. But we're going to go into the head-to-head as well, because is the British countryside racist and colonial white space? A charity group whose members include the RSPCA, the WWF and the National Trust, they certainly reckon so. Human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan and David Bean of the Countryside Alliance, they do battle on that, and that is next. Stay tuned.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking. Evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment, and the bureaucracy, and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police, and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under, and of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, coming up, Brexit broker Nigel Farage is here to tell us more about the exclusive Rwanda file scoop that he's got. But first, it's time for tonight's Head to Head. The British countryside has been declared a racist and colonial white space. That's according to wildlife charities. So the Wildlife and Countryside Link, an umbrella group whose members include the RSPCA, the WWF and National Trust, has presented a report to Parliament which claims the perception that green spaces are dominated by white people can prevent people from ethnic minority backgrounds from using green spaces. So, tonight I am asking, is the British countryside a racist and colonial white space? Let me know your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me at gbnews and make sure you take part in our poll. The results will follow very, very shortly. But going head-to-head tonight are human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan and Countryside Alliance spokesperson David Bean. David, thank you very much. Is the countryside racist?
I don't think it is, Patrick. And I think what concerns me when I hear reports such as this is that when organizations spend time and oxygen in calling the countryside racist, in telling people from ethnic minority backgrounds that they won't be welcome if they go into the countryside, then there's an awful danger that they might start to believe it. And that's exactly the opposite of what we want. We want the countryside to be an open and welcoming place for everyone from any kind of background to go and visit, and potentially, if they like what they see, to go and live, to go and make a career and a life out there.
Shoaib, I mean, this is an absolute load of rubbish, isn't it?
No, of course it isn't. And in fact, it's not the first report that said this. Obviously, you know, the Countryside Alliance and others would know more about the history, but just looking at it today, you know, since 2003 at least, so for the past 20 years, every 2 or 3 years, we have reports who said this. And in fact, I was seeing that there was a report actually commissioned by DEFRA, I believe, so the government, 2017 or 2019, which actually had the same findings. So the point is, every time this does come out, every time there is research into this, those people get boycotted, those people get cancelled. No one takes it seriously.
The racial demographics of rural areas in Britain are 96% white. It's not racist, it just happens to be in Britain, Shoaib.
Well, yes, but that's exactly the point. That's what we need to change then. That's why it needs to be
Okay, all right, okay, good. No,
minorities.
here we go. I want to have this chat. So how do you change the racial demographics of the countryside, Shoaib? Go on.
Well, I don't think we're necessarily talking about changing demographics necessarily. Obviously, long term, that would be a really positive thing. But firstly, I mean, just actually encouraging people to actually go there, even just to spend the day there for a brief holiday. And that's the whole point. I don't think we're necessarily talking about, you know, why are most farmers in the UK white? Why aren't there more Asian or black farmers? That's not the point. The point is, even for a day out, why do ethnic minority families
I would argue,
not feel
I would
the
argue
countryside is the
potentially,
place for that?
David, that there is a bit of racism here. I mean, good grief, if people from ethnic minorities don't want to go to the countryside because they don't want to look at so many white people, well, that's disgusting.
Well, I mean, I agree with Shoaib that it's absolutely a good thing for people to go and visit the countryside, regardless of their background. And I would fully encourage everyone to go and do that. And I think, you know, hopefully he and I can unite in saying to people, be they from ethnic minority backgrounds or others, if you're considering going out and visiting the countryside, acquainting yourself, getting to know it a bit, do that. Absolutely do that. Go and support all of the wonderful rural businesses that we have out there. Go and see the beautiful landscapes, some of the most fantastic landscapes that this world has to offer, and go and enjoy it, because you will find, regardless of your background, that there's a lot to appreciate in it. And, you know, if people don't want to do that, maybe they've got their own reasons for it. That's entirely a matter for them, I would say. But really, the message needs to be, there's so much out there for you to go and see, to enjoy, and please do that.
Shoaib, when was the last time you went to the countryside?
Probably about 2 years ago, to be honest.
Why?
When we actually took a, because that's the point. I mean, to be honest, when you know, when a ethnic minority family gets together, going to the countryside, going to the Lake District, Peak District, isn't the first holiday destination that comes to mind. And that's the point. You wouldn't necessarily think, you know, we're going away for a day, that's where we should go. And that's the whole point, you know.
So why not? It's the Lake District. I used to live in the Lake District, OK? It's, by the way, full of Japanese tourists, because there's a massive attraction for the Beatrix Potter stuff that there is there, and Wordsworth and all this stuff. So first and foremost, can I just say the idea that the Lake District is a white-only space is nuts and untrue. But so, do you personally, Shoaib, are you trying to claim that the reason why you don't go to the countryside with your family is because you feel like you're racially excluded?
Well, yes. I mean, to be honest, if you are asking me exactly, you know, then yes. And that's the whole point. It's not just me. It's my parents. It's my siblings. It's the children. It's families. You know, generally, if a whole family is getting together, a Black or Asian family would not necessarily think, yes, the Lake District is the day for us to go and spend the day. And that's the whole point. And that's what this research is looking at. But then the media and others, you know, they cling on to these few phrases that they've used, you know, colonial and racist, and not actually do anything about the report. And the point is, like I'm saying, every few years this comes out. That's the whole point. We need to change the narrative. We need to change the perception. We need to make it more welcoming for people, rather than just shutting down anyone who suggests that that is the case. The point is, you know, like I was saying,
I don't understand what you want us to do to make it more welcoming. What is it we could possibly... It's the countryside. By definition, it's a load of open fields and spaces. You hardly see anyone half the time you're in the countryside anyway, let alone seeing white people anyway. You just see sheep. You just see cows and fields and hills and lakes occasionally. David, go on. What could you do to make the countryside more welcoming for ethnic minorities? What needs to be done?
Well, the trouble is, Patrick, I kind of find myself agreeing with both of you in that I agree with Shoaib that if there are things that can be done to make the countryside feel more welcoming and open to people, again, regardless of background, because I'm not particularly interested in going down the rabbit hole on race specifically. But equally, I agree with you that it's quite difficult to see what exactly those steps might be. So, I mean, perhaps part of it might turn out to be a marketing scenario. You know, maybe rural areas need to spend more on more effort, more time on marketing themselves to people in urban areas, because ultimately you've got to go to people where they are. And I think ultimately showing the attractiveness of the countryside and promoting it to people is going to be part of the solution.
I think the marketing is the M6. Get on it, drive up it, and you're in the countryside. Anyway, all right, look, both of you, thank you very, very much. That is human rights lawyer there, of course, Shoaib Khan, and Countryside Alliance spokesperson David Bean. Look, who do you agree with, OK? The claim that wildlife charities have made that the British countryside is a racist and colonial white space. Jane on X says, I believe the charities saying this are racist against white people. I must say, I thought that. I'm sorry, the idea that you, can't go to the countryside, it's full of white people. I think that's quite horrendous. Mand on X says, I've been to much of the UK countryside with my Asian family. Not once did we experience any racism, and neither did we give a damn that it was mainly full of white fellow Brits. We actually enjoyed meeting all those white people. These charities need to shut up. Well, it's strong stuff in the inbox there. Your verdict is now in. 5% of you agree that the British countryside is racist and colonial white space. 95% of you say that you disagree. Good. Well done. Now, coming up, the Home Secretary today launched a raft of new protest laws, including jail for scaling national monuments and yobs who show terrorist sympathies. Can I just point out that was already illegal, right? But is Suella Braverman right that James Cleverly's sweeping changes don't go far enough? No-nonsense former Tory Prisons Minister Anne Widdecombe. Let's rip at that shortly, but first, Terrifying details have emerged now in court this week. An Afghan man who lied to gain asylum in Britain was allegedly a Russian spy, met David Cameron, worked for the Foreign Office and even our intelligence services. So does this case now prove our asylum system is a global laughingstock? Nigel Farage is on that, and the bombshell Rwanda files. That's next. It's Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of three abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures, endless red tape. As Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain, they've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No-nonsense former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe coming up, but time now for Nigel Farage. And if things weren't already bad enough, it's now been alleged that a refugee from Afghanistan who met David Cameron, Gordon Brown, the now King Charles, lied to gain asylum in Britain before working in the Foreign Office and having access to a lot of our intelligence, and is a Russian spy. The man who is accused of being groomed by Russia from the age of 5 also worked for GCHQ and MI6, a court heard this week. This is a bingo card of disaster, isn't it? He was stripped of his British citizenship in 2019 after MI5 believed that he was an agent for the Russian military intelligence agency, accused of orchestrating, by the way, that nerve agent attack in Salisbury a year earlier. The alleged spy denies being a Russian spook and is fighting a legal battle to reverse the UK government's decision to strip him of his citizenship. But crucially, he admitted in court that he did lie on his asylum application because he made up a story about fleeing war and omitted the fact that he had already lived in Russia for 6 years. Nigel Farage joins me now. Nigel, this is just an absolute farce, isn't it?
It is, although to give some balance, Patrick, we have had Russian spies deep at the heart of our security services in the past. They were the ones, of course, who all went to Cambridge for some reason. So we have seen these things before. Don't think that woke Cambridge is a modern phenomenon. But this is just one case of so many now that we're seeing in the asylum system. And perhaps the most extraordinary, even more extraordinary than this, is the chemical attacker from Clapham. Twice refused, then gets sexual assault convictions, says that he's joined the Church of England, which most of us are leaving at the moment, but says he's joined the Church of England and is allowed to stay. And everywhere you look, you just see an asylum system that is failing. What do you think? That we've given asylum to over 500,000 people since 2016. You've got to ask yourself, how many bad guys are in there? Just how many people in there intend to do us harm? So the whole thing is a complete catastrophe.
I mean, there may well be an issue as well with the Catholic and the Baptist Church, which we can't ignore when it comes to these conversions. I think this is something, and by the way, make sure you keep it GB News, because there is a scoop coming your way a little bit later on, which does relate to the Church of England and asylum claims, so really seriously do watch out for that one. But Nigel, you've slammed Rishi Sunak in the Home Office for willfully deceiving the nation over the Rwanda plan, after you exclusively revealed on your show last night, and I think the night before as well, that illegal migrants can still delay removal for 180 days, despite the illegal migration bill. The backlog to enter the system for removal could reach nearly 150k. And, I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous, isn't it, what's going on here? Maximum of 500 deportations to Rwanda. So, essentially, Nigel, have you just exposed that Rishi Sunak has been lying about Rwanda?
Yes. March the 7th last year, he stood behind a podium with the slogan, "Stop the Boats," told us that with the illegal migration bill, which became an act in July, that if you come here, you will, cross the channel, you will not be able to claim asylum, you will be detained, and you will be deported. You will not be able to stay. Boom. Even more dramatic than anything Boris said, even more dramatic than anything Suella or Priti said when they were Home Secretaries. And the documents that I was shown, internal Home Office documents, showing no, none of that's actually true. That the fact is you can have an appeal that will last up to 180 days, that we only have detention facilities for 1,000 people. And most of those are used up by serious foreign criminals who've already been caught in our system. The admission that the absconding rate would be very high and that the backlog would go up to between 150 and 200,000 by mid-2026. I mean, literally, at the moment he was making us promises, he was being told none of this is going to work, none of this is possible. And is it any wonder that his personal ratings are now on a par with Prince Andrew? Is it any wonder that their national poll rating was at 20% just the other day? I mean, John Major's worst was 30% back in '97 when they got obliterated by Blair. And you can do lots of things to the British public, but you can't lie to them. You just can't lie to them. And that is what Sunak has done. And he will. And it doesn't even matter now what he says between now and the election. He will not be forgiven.
I'm just going to read a statement from the Home Office to you, Nigel. I'll get you to react to it. So a Home Office spokesperson said, both the British and Rwandan governments have always made clear that this scheme is uncapped. With the will and ability to build capacity over time in Rwanda, we do not comment on unverified, leaked documents. So that's their response, Nigel. What's yours?
Well, the number was 500. The document said in year one, the maximum number we could send was 500. And then if things go well, it might go up in years 2 or 3 to 3,000. 500 was the most that were ever going to go to Rwanda in year one. And still, yesterday at PMQs, he was still talking about Rwanda. I know there was a bet recently that the Prime Minister made. Funny, isn't it? He made a bet. And all the cabinet said, we're not betting people where I am. And I'd be very happy to have a bet with anyone, but, for anything they like, that not a single plane will go to Rwanda between now and the next general election. And we've been led up the garden path. We've been lied to. It's almost as if, chuck some red meat to the children, and it'll all be fine. They'll forget about it. We're not going to.
No. Now, look, we all saw some crazy scenes from the dentist in Bristol yesterday, OK, with a queue of people running down the road. The government is offering £20,000 to dentists who want to return to the NHS and help sort the crisis, which is ridiculous, by the way, because you just be a dentist in private care and become a millionaire, all right? But Tory and Reform MPs have now told the Prime Minister that the problem has been exacerbated by migration to Britain. Nigel, are immigrants taking your dental appointments?
So, it really is. Last night on my show, here on the great GB News, I had a representative on, senior representative of the dental profession. And I said, what's the problem? He said, there are too few dentists. I said, do you think a rise of 10 million in the population since Blair came to power might be a factor? Oh, no, nothing to do with it. There just aren't enough dentists. And it's amazing. Everywhere you go, anybody in a position of authority is in total denial about what an unplanned population explosion has done, and whether it's dentistry, whether it's healthcare, whether it's primary school places in certain parts of the country, whether it's availability, accessibility of housing. The biggest single problem we face in this country is we have a population explosion that is damaging the quality of life for every single one of us, and no one wants to even talk about it. And dentistry, it's perfectly clear. We have too few dentists for a population that's risen by 10 million.
Yeah, exactly. And the mental gymnastics these people do. David Amess, or the problem with social media. You've got Mike Freer, MPs need to be nicer to each other when they converse. They can't address the real elephant in the room there, which, of course, is Islamism. You said there they'll do anything to say that it isn't rapid population growth fuelled by mass migration. Just to tease ahead to something I'll be doing at 10 o'clock, by the way, I just take a little look at what the human rights records are in places like Afghanistan and Iran, where we do have a lot of men coming across on boats, and I just wonder whether or not feminists, actually, should want to stop the boats. But, Nigel, look, thank you very, very much. As ever, tremendous to have you on the show. Always appreciate your time. That is Nigel Farage, getting through a whole host of hard-hitting topics. Now, next Monday, the Prime Minister will take part in the special People's Forum. It's going to be live, and we're in the North East, and it's only going to be on GB News. So, look, over the course of the hour, he'll take a load of questions directly from you, the great British public. It's really important, this, actually. Make sure that you have your say, OK? So if you want to be there, then go to gbnews.com/PM. You can register your interest today, or if you are watching us on TV or on YouTube at the moment, you'll see a QR code on your screen. Just hover your phone over that. Just follow what it tells you to do. You can be there. Your question can be put directly to the Prime Minister, which is, frankly, what we are all about here at GB News. So come on, be a part of it. Now, coming up, yes, you heard me teasing this a moment ago, are misogynistic values now slowly, rapidly, creeping their way into our civilised Western society? I've got my own thoughts on this, OK? I'll reveal all in my monologue in just a tick. But next, the government today introduced new laws to clamp down on rabble-rouser protesters, so people who clamber on national monuments, sing anti-Semitic chants. There are already laws against this, OK? We're just not enforcing them. But do you agree with Suella Braverman that actually we should go further, just ban these protests outright? Former Tory Prisons Minister Anne Widdecombe gives her hot take on that next. It's Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake,
basic-
civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each other.
Why do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Here's Patrick Christys tonight, only on GB News. Coming up, Minister for Common Sense Esther McVey exclusively reveals what Whitehall's woke brigade don't want you to know. But first, James Cleverly has today announced a crackdown on disruptive protests, with police in England and Wales to be given powers to arrest protesters who cover their faces and scale national monuments. Now, while the Home Office might be trying to bill these as new laws, these offences are already covered by existing legislation. So it's been left to the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, to come up with something new. She's called for ministers to be given the authority to totally ban some protests. Look, lots to go at here. I'm joined by former Prisons Minister Anne Widdecombe. Anne, thank you very, very much. Is Braverman right? Should we be allowed to ban some protests, do you think?
I wouldn't want to ban any peaceful protest. We live in a democracy. I'm a great advocate of free speech. And if a protest is lawful and peaceful and notice has been given and all the rest of it, I really don't want to ban that sort of protest. And we have laws, as you've rightly said, to deal with the more disruptive type of protests. As far as I'm concerned, you know, fine if what Rishi wants to do is to, if you like, clarify those laws and make it explicit rather than leaving it as implicit. I mean, for example, climbing public monuments is not an offence in itself, but obviously if it is, if it's an act of vandalism. So he wants to make things explicit. I have no problem with that. But my problem has been, for some time now, that the police have just not been sufficiently active.
Well, this is it, and I just don't know if this changes that. And let's take the face coverings one as an example.
Yeah.
OK, because, so, let's say on Saturday we have however many tens of thousands of people, as we have done every day for the last few months now, every weekend for the last few months, I should say, walking through London, face coverings. I mean, people can see some stuff in the video here. But we're not going to arrest 10,000 people, are we?
No, and if 10,000 people had their faces covered, I think you would be absolutely justified in just banning the protest, just saying that's it, and stopping it. I really think that would be justified. But if a dozen people have got face coverings, you arrest that dozen. But you do arrest them.
But this is the problem. They're not going to, are they?
No, because there's a shortage of police. There's a shortage of prison places. There's a shortage of custody places because if you take somebody into the police station, you then have to process them. You know, it's not we don't live in a dictatorship. We don't just throw them straight into prison. You've got all the processes to go through, which take a huge amount of time. And really, this has been a problem now that's been accumulating over many, many years. I can remember when I was Shadow Home Secretary in 1999, making a speech about the burdens on the police and what we should be doing about it. We haven't done any of it.
No, we've not. And, you know, here we are changing our laws in this country for something that is essentially to do with people protesting about a foreign issue on the streets of Britain. I think that speaks volumes about where we are. I'm just going to shift us on a bit because there's a couple of big stories I want to get your views on. So speaking to ITV last night, Rishi Sunak had some warm words for his former boss, Boris Johnson. Shall we have a look?
Look, I mean, I'm proud of the work that we did together, and we worked well together for a long time.
I noticed you didn't answer whether you'd have him back.
Well, I never talk about these personnel things, but look, I speak to him on an occasion. We worked well together. I mean, I spoke to him, I can't remember, right? Probably late last year.
What do you make of that, then, Anne? Do you think that he should bring Boris back into his cabinet?
Look, I don't think whatever he does... I mean, Boris would be a much better bet than David Cameron, that's for a certainty. But I don't think whatever he does is going to make much difference now to Conservative chances at the next general election. They've completely blown it. They had a vast majority, so many opportunities, even given COVID. So many opportunities, and all they've done is fight each other. It's the age-old problem. You've got the officers brawling in the mess and the troops at action stations in the country, and eventually the troops just desert.
But they walked into a Labour trap, though. I mean, Labour wanted Boris out. Well, I think the Conservatives allowed the Labour Party to dethrone a sitting Prime Minister with a massive majority and widespread support in the Red Wall especially. And they just let them do that.
Yeah, well, they wouldn't have let them do it if they hadn't been so divided amongst themselves. I mean, that is the whole point. You know, united we stand, divided we fall. We've got I've said this to you before, but you've got a really second-rate parliament. You've got people who panic. You've got people who have no sense of history and proportion, none at all. And therefore... And that is why Labour is allowed sometimes to walk all over them.
Yeah, they are. I just think it will go down as one of the greatest soft coups ever. It will, seriously. The idea that they just allowed the Labour Party, essentially, to get rid of a guy who just won an absolutely stonking election. You just had to look at who was happiest when that happened, right? Who was happiest? The Labour Party will have been having champagne parties and all of this stuff, weren't they? But can we get your view, Anne, please, on it's a matter close to your heart, I think, is the Church of England being accused of helping migrants game the asylum system. Speaking a little bit earlier this week, there's a spokesperson for the Church of England who said, Abdul Azidi case is clearly shocking and distressing incident. Our thoughts and prayers are with those affected by it. But as we've said, it is ultimately the role of the Home Office to decide who comes into our country. Are you a bit let down by the Church of England, do you think?
Well, I left the Church of England because I already felt so let down, and that was in the 1990s. And they've just gone from bad to worse. But I would make this very serious point, that if somebody converts to Christianity and is baptised, that is a sacrament. And to actually give that sacrament, if you suspect that it's not genuinely required, that is sacrilege. That is sacrilege, and I make no apology for saying so.
What should the punishment be for that, do you think?
Well, I mean, in past times, you would have had the clergy courts. What they do now is shrug their shoulders, basically. Now, what's Welby got to say about this? I mean, this is all going on. He's hardly uttered a squeak.
Well, we've gone to the Church of England. I mean, I've gone to them, I think, 6 times in the last 48 hours, and they just keep sending me that statement. And no matter what I send them, they just keep sending me... They don't want to answer this.
No, they don't want to face up to what's been going on.
But that's the problem. Do you think, right, OK, is this naivety or is it politically motivated? Because there is a scoop coming a little bit later on in this show, actually, with Alison Pearson. It's on an issue... This. Yeah, they are clearly now giving in to pressure. The idea that if you do not baptise this individual and then vouch for them in a tribunal, they're going to be deported back to wherever, and they feel like they might have blood on their hands.
Well, I mean, the fact is that if they're going to be deported, that is a Home Office decision. It is not for anybody, clergy or layman, to interfere with that decision. And they can appeal to the courts. And if they've lost an appeal in the courts, he did finally win, but twice he was actually about to be deported. That is something else that the government needs to get a grip on. Why do we have multiple applications for asylum? One application. Yeah. One application. One appeal. That's it.
And that's it for us as well, I'm afraid. Thank you very much.
You.
Great to have you in the studio. That is, of course, the wonderful Anne Widdecombe. Now, coming up, it's a big hour for you, actually, because we've got Minister for Common Sense Esther McVey exclusively revealing what the woke brigade in the civil service, really running our country, what they're up to. Former GB News star is ready and waiting to go shortly, but I care very much about this. Are misogynistic values creeping their way into our civilised Western society? We've got chemical attacks, we've got honour killings, we've seen the lot. Where is this coming from? We know where it's coming from, and why aren't we stopping it? And a huge scoop in relation to the Church of England and fake asylum claims. You do not want to miss this hour on Patrick Christys Tonight. We're only on GB News.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Hill snow continues in the north during the next 24 hours. Spells of rain at lower levels and further south across the country as milder Atlantic air starts to take over. That's been pushing up against cold Arctic air in the north, and in between we've had a spell of rain, sleet and hill snow. Some significant snow continues to build up from the Peak District into the southern uplands and also for the tops of the hills in Northern Ireland. Could cause some disruption overnight in places, but elsewhere, well, really at lower levels it's rain, and certainly in the south, a very mild night to come, 10 Celsius with heavy showers for parts of Wales, the south and southwest. Those continue during Friday, further bouts of rain or showers moving through parts of England and Wales, some brighter interludes at times, but a gusty wind. Meanwhile, the rain, sleet and hill snow pushes north, increasingly affecting eastern Scotland, where significant snow will build up during the second half of Friday and into the start of the weekend. 20 centimetres over the Grampians, for example, but rain generally at lower levels as we begin the weekend for the north and east of Scotland. Elsewhere, brighter spells for many on Saturday morning. Certainly some sunshine for the north, central and eastern part of England, but further showers come through from the west later on. And it's going to be much milder across most of the UK through the weekend, except for the far north of Scotland.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen to the highest since the Attlee government way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight, TV exclusive with Government Minister for Common Sense, Esther McVey. She's about to reveal what woke civil servants don't want you to know. And
it is damaging for asylum seekers in need of protection and safe and legal routes to be heard.
Well, asylum seeker fanatic Archbishop Justin Welby is crucified with an almighty scoop. You will not believe how bad this is. Also, where's Abdul?
You know, I am appealing to Abdul that he needs to come forward to get that medical attention and to hand himself in.
Have we let a load of violent woman haters into Britain? Plus,
this petition right here is solely about getting free seats for people of size.
Too fat to fly. Are you about to be weighed at the airport? I've got all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages today with Star Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, Tory peer Lord Sean Bailey and ex-Labour advisor Matthew Larzer. Plus, right, what is happening there? All right, I'll tell you in a minute or two. Get ready, Britain, here we go. Feminists should want to stop the boats. Next.
The latest story from the GB newsroom tonight is that Labour has confirmed it's axing billions of pounds from its commitment to environmental issues. Sir Keir Starmer says the pledge, one of the party's flagship policies, will be scaled back to almost £24 billion instead of the original 28. He says Labour has had to cut back on its warm homes plan to insulate millions of houses over the next decade. And in the United States tonight, President Joe Biden has been accused of keeping classified national security material at home, but he won't face criminal charges. An investigation into sensitive documents kept in his garage in Delaware began more than a year ago after it was revealed the documents were top secret and contained details of US foreign policy on Afghanistan. In his defence, the president was described as an elderly man with a poor memory. The White House says President Biden and his team cooperated fully with the investigation and handed the material back immediately. Here, armed police have searched 2 addresses in Newcastle today in their hunt for chemical attack suspect Abdul Azidi. It's understood the search warrants included his place of work, but no arrests were made. Azidi is believed to be suffering from severe facial injuries, which police say could be life-threatening if left untreated. The last recorded sighting of him was near Vauxhall Bridge in London just over a week ago. The minimum unit price for alcohol in Scotland is to be raised from 50p to 65p. That means shops in Scotland won't be able to sell a bottle of wine for less than £6.09. The price hike will be subject to parliamentary approval and won't take place till the end of September. Deputy First Minister Shona Robertson says it shows Scotland remains world-leading in improving public health. Now, Viagra could reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease in men, according to a new study. Experts are saying the erectile dysfunction drug has been found to cut the chances of men developing Alzheimer's by around 18%. Researchers say the findings are encouraging, but more research is needed, adding that medical trials tracking both women and men were needed to see if the surprise findings could apply to women as well as men. Now, snow is blanketing parts of the country today as a new cold spell settles in tonight. Dozens of schools were closed today as forecasters warned up to 25 centimetres of snow could fall in some elevated areas across Britain. Amber warnings are in place for Northern Ireland and North Wales. Yellow warnings are in place across the rest of the UK. The Met Office says the worst is expected tonight, and tomorrow snowy conditions will move further north. The Queen has described the King as doing extremely well under the circumstances following his cancer diagnosis. Queen Camilla said her husband, who's undergone his first bout of cancer treatment this week, was very touched by all the messages of support he's received from the public. His Majesty has been spending time at his Sandringham estate in Norfolk after postponing all public-facing duties. For the very latest stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
It's now around 10 days since asylum seeker and born-again Christian Abdul Azidi allegedly poured acid over some women and children. Let's just check in with the police investigation, shall we? So Commander Saville said he could have gone north, he could have gone east, south, west, or he could have gone abroad. Right then, lads, we're narrowing it down. Oh, and he might be in the Thames. Come on, quick, we need to look at what we're doing something here, OK? Let's raid a couple of kebab shops in Newcastle. Look, but we are missing the big issue here. We are missing the big issue. The left wanted to play the it's all about violence against women card, not the broken borders reality. Fine, OK, let's do that then. What are women's rights like in Afghanistan? Well, the UN says women have been banned from going to parks, gyms and public bathing houses. They've been stopped from pursuing education. Their ability to work outside of health and education is all but prohibited. The cumulative effect of the Taliban's edicts and behaviours has largely resulted in the imprisonment of women within the walls of their homes. What about Iran? As another example, Iranian women have not only been forced to wear the veil, but they've been forbidden from dancing or singing solo in public, riding a bicycle, attending matches in sporting arenas, becoming judges, or just on the off chance, a president. They must sit at the back of the bus and can travel abroad only with their husband's permission. People will go, oh yeah, that's why they're seeking asylum. It's not the women coming over here on the boats, is it? Get real. The people who really care about women's rights in this country, they should want to get a grip of our asylum system. Let's get the thoughts of my panel on all of this. I know someone who feels incredibly strongly about it is Daily Telegraph columnist, the wonderful Alison Pearson. I also have Tory peer Lord Bailey and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larzer. Alison, do we need to speak more about importing a load of rabid misogynists?
Yeah, we really do, Patrick. I mean, we didn't have until relatively recently these things called honour crimes. I mean, they're horrible, horrible crimes. This guy, Azidi, allegedly has poured, drain cleaner over a woman he was believed to be in a relationship with and children. And that we have our own domestic violence problems. But this is particularly acute, coming from countries where women are second-class citizens. Now, this guy coming from Afghanistan, you just outlined the treatment of girls there. For me, if we're going to have asylum seekers, I'd like to have Afghan young women and girls who can't go to schools or colleges. I don't want fit young men like this who have ingrained in him culturally that women are property. If one disobeys you, you chuck something in her face so she is blinded, OK? So it's absolutely disgusting, and it's true that the left in this country say, oh, the poor asylum seekers. Priti Patel has said very, very well, put the victims first. Let's forget about these horrible foreign criminals, but it's always the pity vote for these people, and it's really disgusting. I'm very concerned. We know lots of these asylum seekers hanging around outside junior schools, Patrick, approaching young girls. We saw what happened in Rochdale. You've imported these men from these countries. Women in this country, and indeed men who love women, fought very hard for the equality women have in this country, and we don't want these disgusting men importing their cruel and horrible practices against women.
Sean?
Look, one of the problems that we could be dealing with uncontrolled immigration is importing social problems for the future. The left have a blindness, don't they, for this inconvenient truth that these people do not share any of your liberal views. Now, is that a reason to stop a person coming there? Probably not. But you need to look at what's going to happen when they hit a community. There's many communities in this country that's growing at a pace, and immigration is a very big part of that don't have these liberal views that will become social problems from here on and certainly into the future. And if we don't discuss those things now, we'll only be dealing with the problems. We won't be dealing with anything to mitigate those problems. And look, it's not new. In 1982, we already had the first conversations about Sharia courts. So they were setting up Sharia courts in 92 to administer Muslim weddings or breakdowns. But the core problem for me with something like that is The law should be the same for everyone.
Yeah.
And I remember the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time, I think it was Rowan Wilkinson, was making speeches saying we should be accommodating that. And that shows you that's where it changes. And where the left really have a blind spot, you saw it with terror suspects that we're trying to re-educate, is they think a few weeks hanging around with somebody who reads The Guardian is going to change someone's life-held beliefs. It's not true. What they will do is change the communities around them, and that's something we need to be aware of.
Yeah, look, Matthew, do you think the left is honest enough about the fact that we have people coming over on boats who maybe not necessarily getting here illegally, but quite possibly come from countries where women are treated like worse than second-class citizens? I mean, how do we expect that to end?
Well, look, I think we need to say, first of all, that we can't say that everybody who arrives on a small boat, let alone everybody who's a legal migrant from countries which do have different social norms to us, is necessarily misogynist. So I don't think we should put everybody in the same bracket. But absolutely, integration is a huge thing. It was actually a big issue in the last Labour government. I get disappointed when this becomes a left-right issue, because actually, under the last Labour government, Gordon Brown, whatever else you think about him, was very big on people, on British values, on people not living in separate but equal communities, which is a big issue when there were race riots in the north of England during the last Labour government. Now, I'm not saying that the citizenship exam that everybody has to sit now is exactly the solution to the problem, but at least it was a nod in that direction, and we haven't had a big enough national conversation about that. So, we do need to make sure that people share our values.
But I'd say the world has changed, because what the left is very, very guilty of now is identity politics, and that plays exactly into this. I came from a very big Muslim community where I grew up, really good, decent people, did family in a way that I think the whole world can learn from. But what identity politics did to their community and mine was separate us. And all of a sudden, you looked at everybody differently. We were working on the fact that we were different, not British, and I think that's a problem. And if you put that against today's going on, where everything British apparently is second class or shouldn't be adhered to, or we should hate the British past, that mix with people's held views that they've imported with could be a very big social problem in the future.
Do you know what's the greatest agent, the solvent of these difficult problems, is mums? And Rishi Sunak gave an interview in which he said that his mum had wanted them to speak without accents, his family, the kids in his family. And a lot of women, particularly in some of these communities, Muslim communities particularly, where men are still ruling the roost, the women aren't allowed, they're not fully participating in the workplace. Given a chance, most mothers want their sons and daughters to be as good as anybody else's or better, to have the same stuff, to speak well, to present well, to go and make a success of their life. If you put a cap on female expectations in those communities, you are never going to have success.
I think it's really important that the politicians listen to and seek out the views of women in communities, because the community leaders, who often tend to be almost overwhelmingly men, are often the people that people listen to. They're the people who join the local political party, whether it's the Tories or Labour, and exert influence.
This is what really winds me up, right? Because you can see it. It's so clear. It's crystal clear that you've got in a lot of these communities, basically all of the leaders are men, all of the spokespeople are men. There's massive segregation as well at certain religious things that take place there. You see a load of women who never leave the house.
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing a...
Why aren't we calling this out? Call it out.
The real problem is any politician, particularly if they're white, talks about this, gets treated as if they're racist. I come from a community where women have been that absolute boost. I came here, I grew up in a single-parent family. My mum ran the roost. My grandmother, and the way she viewed the world, is why I'm in the Lords. From my grandmother's lap to sitting on that red bench, and there's some women in my community that pushed it forward. If you have a community that eradicates its women in that way, particularly if they're a poor community, that community's finished.
You don't mess with Mrs Bailey, do you?
Not at all.
I mean, so there's this thing that the left talk about, which is called intersectionality, where it's, you're more than one level of oppression. So you're not just black, you're a black woman, it's intersectional oppression. And I think sometimes the left remember that actually works the other way as well. Because what you've seen communities in Tower Hamlets where stickers have been stuck on lampposts, saying, gay guys go home, and I'm putting that politely. My best friend lives just off Brick Lane, and I tell you what, he gets the F word thrown at him every Friday afternoon on Brick Lane. So, the left needs to look at, how different identity characteristics work together.
How about the fact that I have written furiously against the burqa, which I think dehumanises women. I hate seeing a woman in a black tent walking 3 paces behind a man. I cannot stand it in our country. All girls and women should be equal in our country. But I get called Islamophobic for saying that in a British newspaper, and there are girls in Iran, Patrick, who are in jail tonight because they are fighting to take off the veil. So which is it? Is it if young Muslim women are saying, I don't want to wear this veil, and I write in this country, don't make these girls wear these dehumanising garments, and then I'm anti-Muslim?
But we need to hear, and we need to hear the voices of young women in communities more, and that's what I think is. Otherwise, people do get all painted into boxes.
No, it's more than that. What we need to have is people be able to talk in a real sense, be they black, white, blue or grey, because what people do, they wheel out people from the community who support their view. What you need to be able to do is have a realistic conversations about some of the tougher parts of it as well.
OK, look, really good start. I've got a heck of a lot coming your way. Before I tell you what it is, though, fancy the chance to win £18,000 in our Great British Giveaway? Well, you have to be in it to win it. And here's how you can get your entry.
We want to turn 2024 into 2020 more with your chance to win £18,000 in cash to spend however you like. You really could be the next big winner of our Great British Giveaway. Phil from West Yorkshire won our last one.
I never won a penny in my life.
Well, congratulations, you've won £10,000.
Oh my God, wow.
For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 23rd of February. Good luck.
Coming up, I will bring you the first of tomorrow's news front pages as they land. Plus, we do have a big exclusive from tonight's panellist, Alison Pearson. We'll reveal all later on, but hey, it does involve people converting to Christianity who quite possibly shouldn't be, so I think you can all read between the lines there. But before that, the Minister for Common Sense, Esther McVey, exclusively reveals what the woke brigade in the civil service, who are, I think, really running our country, are really up to. And here's Keir Starmer, not Rishi Sunak, using the tragedy of Brianna Ghey for political point scoring.
If you look at what I said, I was very clear talking about Keir Starmer's proven track record of U-turns on major policies because he doesn't have a plan.
OK, Esther McVey, MP, Government Minister, joins me right here in the studio. That's next. Stay tuned.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney. Weekdays from 3 p.m.
Or they're trying to make it better, or they're trying to make it slower, a lot slower. Slower enough, in fact, for it to sufficiently allow the boats to start coming in to cause further political damage to Rishi Sunak.
Which it will do if it carries on.
Of course it will. And this is the Labour peers, the Lib Dem peers, and no doubt some of the Conservative wets, banding together, causing political damage to Rishi Sunak. And the longer it goes on, the worse it will be for the Conservative Party.
There's now a deadline on the Rwanda plan. It's got to start working this summer to have any electoral benefit for Rishi Sunak, because of course if the election is in November, by then the costings will slow down. It's got to be up and running by about May or June, and then they'll take it from there.
Cool. And you have a crumb of comfort for us. Rishi Sunak met a Prime Minister.
Well, a crumb of comfort for those who want to stop the boat, certainly, or we'll get towards it. The PM today met Alexander De Croo, who's a Belgian Prime Minister. They've agreed a UK-Belgium law enforcement cooperation agreement. In short, that is a focus on surveillance and information, ultimately, which should help stop the boats. Not many boats make crossings from Belgium, but it's the kind of they can hopefully use law enforcement. These are the kind of deals which Sir Keir Starmer's talking about. If he becomes Prime Minister, he'll do more of these deals with countries on the continent, and this shows that the Tory PM can do them too.
And there may be intelligence sharing of crime gangs that operate within Belgium. As you say, it's a much, much further distance, much more perilous across the North Sea. Very unlikely that people will be leaving in any great great numbers from Belgium. But nevertheless, is this of note, or is it a token victory against the backdrop of domestic loss?
It's interesting they can do it with Belgium and not do it with the European Union, because so far we've been told the returns agreements can't be agreed with individual countries because they've got the European Union to talk to. Maybe this deal can be mirrored with France, and that might help with better cooperation, because basically after Brexit we're a sovereign country. We have to work on some areas more closely with our European neighbours.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News. Look, coming up, my panel are going to return. We've got tomorrow's front pages and a big scoop as well from Alison Pearson about the Church of England and the asylum seeker claims. But first, here's Government Minister for Common Sense, or at least that's the nickname anyway, Esther McVey. Esther, thank you very, very much for joining us. Great to have you on the show. Much appreciated.
Great to be back.
It is, yes, exactly. It's been a little while since you've graced these studios, isn't it? But look, Rishi Sunak has refused to apologise, even after the parents of Brianna Ghey asked for an apology in response to his comments towards Keir Starmer. Was he right to refuse to apologise?
I was watching PMQs and saw what happened, and the point was Rishi was making a point about all of the flip-flops, all of the U-turns that Keir Starmer had done, and then he said, as a matter of fact, Keir Starmer doesn't know what a woman is. You know, the biological definition of what a woman was, he does not know, and he cannot stand by it, and that is a matter of fact. Totally separately, we have the issue of that terrible, terrible murder up in Cheshire, actually, and those two horrendous killers and what happened there. Now, this is a totally separate issue altogether, and I think it was crass that Keir Starmer should have tried to have brought the two issues together, totally separate, and therefore this was about saying a fact which the Prime Minister did, and he shouldn't be apologising for saying that, because it was about Keir Starmer and that he doesn't know what a woman is.
Yeah, one thing that stood out to me was that Keir Starmer said, well, today of all days, or this week of all weeks, we can't do... Well, that implies to me that he would chop and change what he thinks or what he says based on his watching. Because he was saying, well, you can't say that when Brianna's mum is up there. You know, you think, well, hang on a minute, a fact is a fact, so certainly when it comes to what a biological woman is, no?
But I think this is what, I'll say socialists do, Keir Starmer does, to close down any kind of free speech and talking about an issue. As I said, he brought two issues together, which was wrong, to try and close down a conversation about him not knowing what a woman was. And I think that is actually sinful.
OK. It has been a bit of a gaffe-filled week, some would say, though, for Rishi Sunak, depending on which side you look at it. Do you think he's got the political nous to be Prime Minister? Do you think he's got the political nous to win an election? You know, betting on the Rwanda plan, for example.
What do you mean? What are you trying to say? That he was in an interview and somebody said to him, would you put £1,000 or whatever is on a bet? And he's having a conversation. Are you closing down conversations? Because I'd say that was a jocular conversation. And I actually thought Rishi put his money where his mouth was. He's saying, I believe my plan will work. And yes, I would. Now, if we're saying people can't even have what I would have thought would be just a conversation with somebody, I bet you £250 or whatever, if you're saying we can't even do that, I think that's nonsense. I believe in free speech, freedom of expression, and I do believe that actually Rishi, unlike Keir Starmer, stands by what he believes. I think, this is a man... Keir Starmer, who was going to renationalise, now isn't, was going to get rid of student fees, now isn't, doesn't believe in Brexit, now he does, and we've got the biggest car crash for Labour, their flagship policy, 28 billion a year on their green, policy, he's now, today, saying he's not going to do it. Well, maybe he will, maybe he won't, you can't really trust him.
OK, all right. Now, I am fascinated by what your job is, OK? All right, so it's fair to say the nation is as well. So, Minister for Common Sense. It's not the official title, is it?
No. So the official title is Minister in the Cabinet Office without portfolio.
Right.
So this isn't a new job. It's been around since 1916. The Cabinet Office sort of started then. And the Cabinet Office, most people say, is like the engine room of government. It's where the oversight, coordination of policy is done. If government's got to deal with the crisis, that's done there. And also efficiency savings, reform, modernisation will be done there. And then things like looking at and overseeing all those arm's length bodies. So that is the job. I don't have a portfolio, which means that I look across everybody's portfolio. So Ken Clarke had the job to David Cameron, and Peter Mandelson had the job for Tony Blair, who said it was the best job in government.
What have you found? You've seen behind the curtain now. I mean, there's some things there. A shocking report 14 months ago, we found civil service was spending 1 million days a year collectively on equality and diversity training, for example, at a cost of 150 million quid to the British taxpayer. You brought in to stop this kind of stuff, were you?
Yeah. So what the taxpayers are saying, and I absolutely agree with them, and I'm on their side, they're saying, we don't want to be paying for these ballooning away days, these courses, spurious courses. What we want to do is to make sure you are doing the job at hand. We want to have a value for money, and we want to make sure there isn't any waste. So I'll give you an example. So, 308 arm's length bodies, by the very name of them, they're arm's length. But I've written out to all of them to say, customer service, how are you looking after your customer, what are you doing, how quick is it to respond to something, how long do you take to actually reply to an issue and get a case sorted. And the other thing I'm doing, I'm working, and when I get that information back, I'll be dealing with it. Are they doing the job at hand? Has it slipped in their service from 2018? And bit by bit, I will scrutinise it, work with it, and get them to do some work. At the same time, councils... looking at what they're doing, what their equality, diversity, inclusion spend is, how many people they've got as equality, diversion, inclusion champions. If they're asking the government for more money, if they're looking to put council tax up, I'm now working with Michael Gove to say there must be conditions applied to that money that is going to them, and one of them is they've got to cut back on waste, EDI spend and days away from the office. So those are some of the implementations that will go with the money going there. So that's what I'm coming in. Well, that's just the reality, isn't it? You can't put up taxpayers' bills. You can't be asking the government for more money and yet not getting rid of wasteful spend yourself. And I think that is... essential. So that's what I'm doing. So I'd say that is coming. And I'm sure there will be, but in that regard, we are handing over extra support, as is the public. Therefore, in return, what we'd expect is any form of waste, not doing your job at hand, needs to go, because at the end of the day you should be serving your taxpayers, and that's what I'm doing. So I call that common sense, and I'm quite happy to wear the mantle of common sense.
OK, yeah, and last week as well, the civil servants apparently being taught that rolling their eyes at work is a microaggression. This is why I was asking about how it was received, right? Because it's one thing saying, which I think many people, certainly watching this show and listening to this show, will agree with you for, which is these things like equality and diversity inclusion training is a complete and utter waste of money in a lot of cases. But if you're also dealing with the kind of people who think that rolling their eyes is a microaggression, I mean, you've got to change a whole attitude of people, haven't you?
OK, well, I think as well, when people have done well, I think you've got to praise them as well. So working with the Passport Office, we're doing really badly during lockdown and just after. And actually now they've got people in, they've sorted out the backlog, they've got a new computer system in, and they're doing really well. The DVLA, was exactly the same. It was on the naughty step. It got everybody in, all frontline staff, managers working together, etc., and getting those lists down. So where it works, I will be working with them as well to say, how did you make it work? And I think you also have to look at the frontline staff who are civil servants actually are in all the time. It's a sort of the managerial and the other job is saying, hang on a sec, can you really do that job from home? Can you really work from home? And then we've just pushed through now. I'm not saying it's perfect, but we've now got a 60-40%. They've got to be in work for 60% of the time. I'd like to see that go up, but I can only do that when I've collected all that data to say, do you know what? We're doing better. We've turned the country around because, trust me, lockdown really did disrupt the work patterns of the nation, and I think we're slowly coming out of that. And I'm somebody who's sort of on the case and working with John Glenn, got the full backing of Rishi Sunak and Oliver Dowden, and working with Kemi Badenoch as well.
And you are dealing with a group of civil servants who they were caught out listing, quotes, a change of government as one of their top wishes for 2024. I mean, this is the people that you've got to try and get hold of, isn't it, really?
I know, but look, you can't damn them all. You know what I mean? There will be some that might find it more difficult. But at the end of the day, what I say to them, look, all we've got to think about is who is paying our bills and who are we here to serve. And I'll tell you who that is. That is the taxpayer. That is the person at home right across the country. So it doesn't matter personality clashes. I don't want to know about that. We don't want to know about biases and differences. We need to know we've got a common goal, and the common goal is working for the public.
OK. Should Ed Miliband resign over Labour's U-turn on £28 billion green investment, do you think?
I don't know, because who knows what Starmer will do next. Starmer could do another U-turn and he could be back in favour.
If he was in government,
I mean, it's unbelievable.
He'd have gone for that. He would have had to have gone. That's his flagship policy. He would have been a minister, a serving minister. He would have had to have gone.
But Keir hasn't really said what he's going to do. It sounds like they're keeping this now. They're just not telling us the truth about how much money they're putting in there. And maybe Ed and him have come to some sort of agreement there. But I'd say about Keir Starmer, he's making it up as he goes along. He's making it up as he goes along. He really just doesn't know what he's doing. And I think, actually, the public needs to scrutinise a lot more what Labour stand for. I know what I stand for. I know what the Conservatives... That's getting the economy right, which we're doing after lockdown. It's about getting immigration down. Labour isn't doing that. They're going to have more people coming in. And finally, we're proud of our country, and we've got to stand up for Great Britain having a great country, our history, our heritage, and not dividing people as Labour would do with culture wars, and not standing up for Great Britain.
Would you have Boris back in Cabinet?
I think Boris is enjoying what he's doing. And I don't think Boris wants to come back to Cabinet. I've already said on this station I'd have had Nigel Farage in the Lords, but I don't know he wants to go back to frontline politics either.
OK, Ursula, thank you very much for your time. Really, really informative stuff, that. And, well, good luck. You've got a bit of a battle on your hands.
I have, indeed.
Whip a few people into shape.
Do not underestimate it, but I'm the woman for the challenge.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Never doubted it for a second. Now, look, coming up, well, Meghan Markle's been spotted for the first time since the King's cancer diagnosis, but to be honest with you, I think there's a much more important story in town, because I'm going to be delivering the front pages for you, and we do have our panellist, Alison Pearson, bringing us a shocking expose of the Church of England. It is, well, it's a massive scoop. It's a massive scoop. Stay tuned for it. Don't go anywhere else.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called Telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I've got tomorrow's front pages here, hot off the press. The very first of them have just been delivered for my press pack. OK, let's get the Metro out of the way. Absurd arena bomb denier. Judge ridicules troll for fake atrocity claims. So it's a conspiracy theorist who claimed that the Manchester arena bombing was faked, and he's been thrown out by a judge. He's branded him absurd and fantastical. Anyway, The Eye. Post Office admits second IT scandal may be linked to wrongful prosecutions. Yeah, honestly, so this broke initially last night, I think. It appears it gets worse, so this could literally just be Post Office scandal Mark II. So, I mean, how many more of these, by the way? Because the companies that make some of these systems are in other areas of society as well. The Guardian, furious, Starmer stages U-turn on £28 billion green investment. We've covered that a lot. The Daily Express, unleashed, PM vows to call out Starmer's dirty tricks. The Sun, blue what? After VAR farce, we're now going to have a blue card in football. But there is a story, yeah, I know, there is a story that I've been teasing all evening, and we are going to bring it to you now. And here to do it, to reveal the scoop, is scoop getter, Alison Pearson from the Daily Telegraph. Go on, then.
I've been working on this all day. And then I've had to comb my hair and come and appear here. Yes, so a vicar, Reverend Matthew Firth, got in touch with me. He had taken over a church, St Cuthbert's in Darlington, up in the northeast, and he got there and he thought, hang on a minute, there's a lot of adult baptisms going on in this church, and there's a long queue for them, and they're all gentlemen from the Middle East who've had their first asylum claim turned down. And the minute they get the asylum claim turned down, they decide to become a Christian, Patrick, because that counts in the next appeal, as we've seen with Abdul Azidi. You know, if you can say you're a Christian, you're going to be persecuted when you go back to your country of origin. So what Matthew Firth found was he described a conveyor belt of baptisms with asylum seekers abusing the system. And Matthew is a very good man. He's a man of God. And baptism is a sacrament to people who believe in God. It's literally sacrilegious to baptise someone who isn't doesn't want to come to Christ. So it's a huge scandal. He thinks it's going on in most parishes in the country. We could be talking about thousands of asylum seekers basically taking the Church of England for a ride. And a couple of other things Matthew said. Immigration lawyers, the minute these guys...
This is big. But can I just say to everyone, this is a really big bit. Go on.
So the minute the guys were baptised, he said they practically had professional photographers taking pictures of them at the baptism, put the pictures up on their Facebook. I've converted, you know, all singing, all dancing. Next day, email comes from their immigration lawyer saying to to Matthew Firth, Vicar, can you please provide evidence of all the amazing Christian work, you know, Mr Abdul does? He said absolutely not, because he doesn't do it and it's not true. But that would be terribly helpful. He also saw a Muslim guy, a middleman in the church, with his pockets stuffed with money from these asylum seekers. The Muslim man's coming up to the vicar at the door when he's saying goodbye to the parishioners, and he's saying, these need baptising, these need baptising, he needs baptising. So it's an industrial scale use of a Church of England sacred ceremony to play the asylum system. And it's endorsed, tacitly endorsed by the Church of England hierarchy, who don't want to be called out on it at all.
And, as well, Sean, the next step in this must surely be to get in touch or find the firm, the legal firms involved in this and say, hang on a minute, are you seriously just trying to farm? Because they're obviously in on it if they're calling the vicar straight away. I mean, it is a conveyor belt now.
This is absolutely outrageous. I'm so outraged about this that when I go back to the Lords tomorrow morning, I'll go straight up to the Archbishop of Canterbury and ask him what does he know about this. I will be tabling a written question to government to say what are they doing to look at the validity of the evidence that people are using to challenge the turning down of their visa or whatever it is, because that's absolutely out of order. I'm a practicing Christian, so that rubs me on that level. Yeah. But the people of this country, if they're going to accept immigration, which I believe we do need, it only can be done if it's done legally. And people gaming the system in this way means people will lose trust with any part of the immigration system. So I'm going to do my little bit to make sure that somebody has a look at this. This is outrageous.
If this has been going on, Justin Welby has to stand down now.
Well, I think that if there's any evidence that the Church know about it and ignored it, then yes, he does. And I think that the Church needs to look at its own guide that Alison's also pointed out in previous articles, which sort of gives a step-by-step guide of how you should necessarily get involved if you're a local parish priest in the appeals process, which seems to me, you know, the assumption, there's an assumption that everybody is illegal is wrong, and assumption that everybody's legal, is also wrong. Can I just say that I'm pleased this week that Yvette Cooper, Labour's Home Affairs spokesperson, has said that she thinks there needs to be a clamping down on the use of, religious conversion in the asylum system. So hopefully, when Labour's in government, there will be a clampdown.
But that's not my point here. The point is that suits Yvette Cooper to say that. What needs to be a clamping down on is an abuse of the system. Yes. I'm pretty sure you'll find this is just one way it is abuse, and the government needs to look at lawyers, because who is it who told these people how to game the system? It's got to be someone with the legal knowledge to do so.
And Alison, your man's quoted here saying it's a combination of being naive but also turning a blind eye. We have to be discerning. Yeah, fine. So there's a certain level of naivety, a certain level of a blind eye, but all of a sudden you get a phone call as a vicar, as a quote-unquote man of God, from a bloke who says, I represent so-and-so. Do you understand that this guy is going to get deported and killed if you don't vouch for him? And you're, you looking the crucifix in the eye, as it were, at church. What do? Well, you sign off on him, don't you? A lot of pressure coming here.
Yeah, but Jesus didn't say thou shalt be taken for a mug, did he, Patrick? I think that's... I was a Sunday school teacher. I don't remember that amongst the Ten Commandments. I mean, literally, what Matthew Firth is saying is that a lot of these vicars, they're well made up. Oh, they've got lots of converts. They can say, oh, we've got lots of people being baptised. It's nothing to be proud of. And Matthew Firth, who I've got great admiration for because he's very brave to speak out, has said that it's our home. He said, you offer hospitality to people, but if people come into your home and they make a mess, then it devalues...
It's a bit like, isn't it a bit like the modern equivalent of, remember in the 80s when nice, well-meaning doctors would sign people off onto long-term sick because they felt, sorry for them. It seems that it's basically a scandal like that.
Look, this has been bubbling under the surface. I would like to thank Alice for coming on and, obviously it's out in the Telegraph, so make sure you read all of it in there, but coming on and discussing it here before anybody else will get the chance to as well. Church of England has become a conveyor belt for asylum seeker fake conversions. I think this now, more than any article that we've seen on this subject so far, could be the thing that actually gets some real change done. And we've got Lord Bailey, who's going to storm into the House of Lords tomorrow and bring it with the Archbishop himself. So
Amen. Justin Welby's going to be cowering.
Watch out, Welby. He might be off. He might be off sick. Anyway, right, look, speaking earlier this week, a spokesperson, is this the same flipping statement again? The Church of England said, it is. The case of Abdulaziz is clearly a shocking and distressing incident. Our thoughts and prayers are with all of those affected by it. As we have said, it is the role of the Home Office, not the Church, to vet asylum seekers and judge the merits of individual cases. Yeah, all right. There's only so many times they can...
It is the job of the church to vet people who come into the church.
Yeah, right, next Monday, the Prime Minister will take part in a very special People's Forum live from the North East, only on GB News. Over the course of the hour, he will take questions directly from you, the great British public. If you want to be there, gbnews.com/PM. Go and register your interest today. Scan the QR code on the screen right now. Don't miss out. Coming up, more front pages for you. We've got the Greatest Britain, we've got the Union Jackass. It's all to play for, and including as well, should overweight passengers be weighed like zoo animals before they board a flight? I think so.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Marnie says being sexy in business is entirely possible and maybe even better.
Well, Marnie, this is something I say is true. I've had to live with this for quite a long time. And I think you can do both. Now, tell me, it's lovely to see you, first of all.
Thank you for having me.
In all your gorgeousness. And you're telling me that often is regarded as something derogatory or something to hold you back. Is that right?
It's just this really unfair thing, this really unfair narrative that women can't do both. Even men can do, as you know, Eamon, you can do it. You can do it all. And I just think, you know, women are so multifaceted. They can be mothers, they can be sexy, they can be businesswomen, they can be silly, they can be all these different dimensions. And this press push that we have to limit ourselves to one category, it's just unfair.
But do you think that is where some people may be wrong-footed or go wrong to underestimate you?
Exactly. There is that saying, disarm with charm. So, you know, that there is that idea that people do look at someone who cares about how they look, who's perhaps a bit feminine, and underestimate them. But hopefully I've proved that wasn't the case in the boardroom. And thank goodness for Karen Brady. She's definitely upped the glam stakes on the show. And if anybody can prove that you can be sexy and successful in business, I suppose it's her, really. But where do you think most of the criticism comes from? Because I have to say, hard to believe, but when I was younger, I certainly got a bit of this at my old employer, being told that I had to dress a certain way, not to be too sexy, which I found hugely
just point out, you were told this by women.
I was told this by a female boss who didn't like me wearing zips on the back of my dress. Not just me, but some of the other presenters there. And I took such offence. I felt like she thought that I was some sort of, I don't know what. Do you take offence when people are criticising you, that, you know, in some way they think you're, I don't know? There's just no right answer. And as we said, I think Karen Brady is doing an excellent job at leading the charge that you can be glamorous and get the job done.
Well, I've got more front pages for you now, hot off the press. The Mirror, nation in decay, kids' teeth, shock report. Study reveals 119 children a day are in hospital for extractions. They're going big on the old dentist stuff at the moment. Let's go to the Daily Mail. Can you ever believe a word Sir U-Turn says? Just 48 hours after Starmer insisted his £28 billion a year green policy was desperately needed, he ditches it. Well, I don't know if they were watching my monologue at 9 o'clock, but it is eerily similar to this, so there we go. But the story that we are going to talk about right now is what's at the top of the Mail's front page. Should airlines start weighing passengers? So, I'm joined by my press pack. We've got the wonderful Alison Pearson, off of The Telegraph. We've got Lord Bailey, off of the House of Lords. And former Labour Party advisor Matthew Lord.
Am I not off of the Labour?
Anyway, it just comes to me, this. Right, now, in a world first, Finland's flagship airline has started weighing passengers before they board flights to ensure that planes do not exceed maximum weight limits. Not only will passengers flying Finnair have their luggage weighed, but they're going to weigh the passengers as well. Can I just say, I personally think this is all right. Matthew, your view?
I agree as well. I flew with Finnair earlier in the year to Helsinki. The actual story is they're not going to be forced you to weigh. They're not going to say, you're too fat to fly. Or that wasn't much of a Finnish accent. But probably best I didn't attempt one. What they're doing is all airlines have to work out whether people, you know, how much weight is on the plane as well as the luggage. They're just sort of getting some passengers to volunteer so they can get a sort of average out. So it seems to me perfectly OK.
Sure.
I misread this story. I thought they're going to routinely weigh and say fat bloke, thin bloke, fat bloke, thin bloke. You know what I mean? Extra 50 quid for you.
By the way, I'd be on board with that.
Yeah, but unfortunately...
You're going to get letters.
Unfortunately, if it's a safety matter, they're going to have to. Because I do not want to get on a plane and die just because it's overweight. And I remember Aaliyah, she's a famous American singer, she died in a plane crash that allegedly the plane was overweight with luggage, etc., and people. So it's a very serious thing. So they might have to do it, but they're going to have to find a way of doing it sensitively, because my jibe about fat bloke, skinny bloke, it will feel that way if you're weighed, then charged twice.
I don't want to be too insensitive.
It's not, it's voluntary.
Not like me, is it? But the idea that when you're,
kind of gentler,
you're getting fined for like having, you've done your holiday, you've got your little trinket or whatever you've got, or maybe a wet towel from the beach, and you push you over the weight limit, and you get fined for that, and then you see, Jabba the Hutt coming on after you. And you think, really, seriously, like, am I paying for this when they're three of me?
Well, there's an issue about tall people who, if you're big that way, you have to sort of lump it, and if you're big that way, you expect people to get out of your way.
My worst plane experience. Everyone will know that feeling of coming down the aisle and you see a huge person, and then you think, please God, let that not be me in that seat. And this one time it was me, so I sat down. I was in the window seat next to the biggest man you've ever seen, and I texted a friend and I said, I'm sitting next to a morbidly obese Viking. I sent the text, and then the guy next to me said, who are you calling a morbidly obese Viking?
Oh, my gosh.
He was moved. But, I support the weighing of people for all those reasons. But I have to say, airlines are getting mingier and mingier.
Yes,
with
they
the
are.
seat sizes, you can't get, people are... people need, most of us...
And that's just at the same time as we're getting taller, the seats are getting smaller.
But that's why I misread the story, because I thought this is just an excuse to charge people. I misread it initially. But again, if they can claim it's safety, they'll get away with it.
But do you also remember all those old black and white films where people are checking in for their glamorous flights, and you actually have to weigh before you as you walk on, and they write it down?
That's because the planes are terrible.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right,
proper jets.
We have just about got time to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Alison, Greatest Britain?
My Greatest Britain is the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, stepping forward at a time when the royal family is looking a little bit fragile. She's absolutely brilliant. I wish she was Queen Anne.
Oh, bless. OK, Sean?
My Greatest Britain is Susan Hall, who's a Conservative candidate for Mayor of London. She gave a great speech the other day about how London isn't safe and you'll be safer with Susan. And I just hope Londoners back hard-working Susan to be their new mayor.
All right, OK, go on, Matthew.
And mine is Tory MP Elliot Colburn, who spoke out at PMQs yesterday very movingly and very bravely about his own suicide attempt whilst he was actually serving as an MP. And it reminds us all that no matter where you are in life, we should all be prepared to ask for help.
I think we might have a clip of this, actually.
Yeah.
I want to take this chance to say thank you to everyone who saved me, and sorry to my family and loved ones who I put through such an awful ordeal. In that moment, I felt alone and scared and like there was no way out, and that the world would be better off without me in it.
Oh, gosh, OK, all right. Well, it's almost impossible, actually, for me to choose this evening. I am going to give the Greatest Britain, though, to Queen Anne. There we go, Princess Anne. Right, we've got time for Union Jackass. Alison?
It's Justin Welby in the Church of England for permitting baptism to be used as a ruse by rejected asylum seekers, a real betrayal of the church and of the people, the flock that the Archbishop is supposed to be looking after, which is the British people.
I've got to be honest, I think I was going to take some beating tonight, but go on, Sean. Union Jackass.
My Union Jackass is the Wildlife and Countryside Link, a group of 80 members, including the World Wildlife Fund and RSPCA, and also the National Trust, who say the countryside is racist. I'm so offended. As a black man born and bred in this country, I made sure I make my children holiday in the country as much as possible. I walk the length and breadth of this country. I've never felt that. But the most important thing is this. We've got to stop hating on Britain. It's important. Yeah. You are damaging the future of your children and your great-grandchildren with this. And these I don't know, tea-sipping morons who've decided that Britain is racist. They're not helping my children out. This is not making my children feel more British. It's actually making their grandchildren much more likely to have a problem with my grandchildren. You've got to stop it. The country isn't racist, and the grass in the fields in this green and pleasant land is certainly not racist.
Well,
I shouldn't even...
Tell you what, well done, well done for that.
There's no point in me even bothering, is there? Should we just not do it?
Well, go on.
It's Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister. 1 week you didn't let me do it. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, for showing a great insensitivity this week with his bet with a presenter on another channel about such a serious issue as immigration, and his antics with his cheap jibe, yesterday's cheap trans joke.
OK, all right. Well, I am going to go for the Archbishop, but I would actually quite
I'd go with Sean.
I'd like to do it because you sold it. No. Because you sold it. So, well, no, seriously, because I see it on the paper before, and I just seen the scoop, and I was like, oh. And then, you know, listening to you, Sean, there, you converted me, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah.
But,
I'm going on strike from the Grid Gates.
Yes, there we go.
You have to pay for conversion, Patrick. You do know that.
Oh, well,
I'm going to bribe somebody.
And I'll put it on Facebook, and my lawyer will be in touch in a matter of minutes. Thank you. Sean, let us know how you get on in the House of Lords tomorrow.
I will do.
Alison, we'll talk to you again about this very, very soon. And Matthew, you keep on trucking away, my man. All right, thank you for watching. It's Headliners next. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 p.m. for another Rip Roar. Until then, keep fighting the good fight.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Hill snow continues in the north during the next 24 hours. Spells of rain at lower levels and further south across the country as milder Atlantic air starts to take over. That's been pushing up against cold Arctic air in the north, and in between we've had a spell of rain, sleet and hill snow. Some significant snow continues to build up from the Peak District into the southern uplands and also for the tops of the hills in Northern Ireland. Could cause some disruption overnight in places, but elsewhere, well, really at lower levels it's rain, and certainly in the south a very mild night to come. 10 Celsius with heavy showers for parts of Wales, the south and southwest. Those continue during Friday, further bouts of rain or showers moving through parts of England and Wales. Some brighter interludes at times, but a gusty wind. Meanwhile, the rain, sleet and hill snow pushes north, increasingly affecting eastern Scotland, where significant snow will build up during the second half of Friday and into the start of the weekend. 20 centimetres over the Grampians, for example, but rain generally at lower levels as we begin the weekend for the north and east of Scotland. Elsewhere, brighter spells for many on Saturday morning. Certainly some sunshine for the north, central and eastern part of England, but further showers come through from the west later on. And it's going to be much milder across most of the UK through the weekend, except for the far north of Scotland.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians. What you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show. Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's
Yes.
this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama.
Alabama, yeah.
And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. and I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting, and that you had... Obviously, I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why, if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions.
No.
We did not experiment with nitrogen. But what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't